And this definitely, you can blurt it out. You don't have to raise your hand, be interactive, unless the sound gets really distorted or something. But what did you all get for question number 1? What answer did you all get?
I got B.
It is B. Absolutely. Let me put my little highlighter on. It is B. So
Yes, it was on that one with me.
yes, and when I love when they ask you true or false questions on the state exam or the school exam, because here's a first test taking skill for you guys. When you have an absolute, which always, never, true, false, there can only be one correct answer, not one that's better than the next or ish. It has to be 3 of them are one way and 1 of them is the other way. So if you ever watched Sesame Street when you were a little kid, they used to have a song, 3 of these things are just like the other. One of these things is not the same. So go for the one that's not like the others. That's how you play the game. So, no applause, please. but when you
Miss
have
Linda, massive applause, but we didn't exactly have that growing up in Brooklyn.
I'm sorry, I couldn't exactly hear you.
We didn't exactly have that growing up in Brooklyn.
Oh, you
So
did.
yeah, I'm right across the street from like the Ferris wheels and
Yeah.
um yes ma'am. Yes ma'am.
So
Like circa like 1980s before me.
okay, yeah. So yeah, a lot of my references, that's the thing about in the last 15 years with
Yes ma'am.
all of the different, streaming and social media and everything, to keep up with the
Sure.
references. Like when I taught the class, 20, 30 years ago, everyone understood the references because, there was so many networks. There was, and then you had HBO and, different limited ones.
Sure.
So there was certain songs that everyone listened to and commercials everyone got. But now there's so much data and information that probably people never heard of a lot of the things. So I'll try to keep it less historical TV and keep
All
it,
right,
real.
that's absolutely fine. I can relate. I
I
saw
don't have
Private
any
Equity
top
before this.
references for people, but it's a test taking skill, which is awesome. So when you have an absolute like true, false, always, never, 3 of the answers have to be one way, whether it's 3 are true and 1 is false, or 3 false and 1 true, depending upon what they're looking for. So in this one, it says what is true. So then 3 of them have to be false. And if you're taking the state exam and you're not exactly what's the right answer, you don't know which one to choose, you could kind of ignore the question and just look at the answers themselves and say to yourself in your mind, is this true or false? So let's just try that as an experiment together. So if we forget about the question, let's just look at the answers and you tell me if this is a true or false statement. So A, all real estate licensees are realtors. Is that a true statement?
False.
It's false because you don't have to be
Negative.
a realtor, right? A realtor is if you join the association and you pay to join the club, but you're not required to join the club or be a member of the board of realtors. But if you call yourself a realtor, it does mean you have to be a member of that group, right? So A is false. So we have one false thing. Then we know the right answer is B, but let's just play along. So B, true or false? All realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors. Well, that's absolutely true. To use the word realtor that's been trademarked, you have to be a member. So we have one false, one true. Then let's go on to C. True or false, the term real estate licensees and realtor may be used interchangeably. Can you do that? You can't call yourself a realtor if you're not a member of that club. So that's a false statement. And then D, true or false. The Florida DBPR, DBPR, which is short for Department of Business and Professional Regulation, authorizes the use of the term realtor. That's false. It's a trademark, right? And so it's been patented, trademark, and people can't use it. So we have 3 false things and 1 true thing. So the answer has to be B. And the reason I'm exaggerating and telling you this is because there's going to be questions and you've studied and you feel like you got a good handle on it. But on the state exam, there's going to be some questions that are weird and they're worded really bizarre. And what do you do when you get something you have no clue? Well, you have to use some kind of guessing skills. So this is one. And if it's a true or false, hallelujah, because you can eliminate 3 of them are going to be one way, whether 3 are false, 3 are true, 3 are never, 3 are always. 3 of them are going to be one way, and 1 is going to be the opposite. And that's the one. You want the unique one, the different one. That's your answer. So it will help. And I'll try to practice those kinds of things with you to get you in a habit. You know that you could pass the state exam if you took it today, if you have good test taking skills. I had a student, he sat in the back of the class, never opened up the book. He listened. He was an active listener. And I was shocked when he came back and he had passed the state exam the first time. I was really shocked. You know, I didn't tell him that I was shocked because, you know, that's not nice. But I was really surprised. So then I just said, oh, so did you, you know, when you went home, did you go study? No. I said, well, I never saw you really opening the book, or you weren't interactive in the class. I said you were polite and you always listen, but what do you contribute that to, you know? And he said, I'm very practical and analytical, and I know how to analyze a question and tear it apart. Okay. So you could pass with no knowledge whatsoever if you're using a lot of good test taking skills. So as many as I know, I'll try to share them with you, and we'll practice them, you know, to get your muscle strong. So the second one, what is the answer that you all came up with?
I put A.
Okay, so we
D.
have a vote for A, we have a vote for B. Anything else?
No, D as in Dorian.
D. Yes, D is in Dorian. Yeah, that is the correct answer.
I back up D.
Yeah, now this is interesting because all of these answers are true in life, but is this a life exam or a real estate exam?
We'll see.
It's real estate, right? And this question, you know, I saw it on my state exam. Will you get the same questions I had? Maybe some of them, you know, not necessarily all of them, but it helps to practice. The person who wrote this book, her name's Linda Crawford. She's on the board for the Department of Education and helped them write the state exam and come up with, you know, a database of questions. So they took a lot of the questions from this book and from previous editions. And not all of them are from here, but, you know, a vast amount are right from the textbook. But do you want to memorize questions and answers? No. You just want to start having some good test taking skills. So the term follow up, it only has one meaning in real estate. In life, it has many different meanings. You know, what's good follow up? Returning phone calls in a timely manner, calling people on holidays, sending them birthday cards. That's all follow up, but not in real estate. Real estate only has one meaning. It's if you contact your customer. And that's yours. It's not your brokers. It's not your coworkers. It's not potential. It's your clients. After you close the deal, if you contact them, that is follow-up. That's the only thing that's follow-up. So let's just go through them, you know, for you know what and giggles. And if you don't know what that means, I'm not going to say it. So A, returning phone calls in a timely manner. That is a definition of, that's a good definition example of follow-up, but again, it's not real estate specific. B, completing instructions given by one's broker. Well, that is good. But again, it's not specific. C, following through on listing calls, for sale by owners. Again, that's good professional practice, but it's not what follow-up means. So D is the only right answer. What a sales associate does for the buyer or the seller, which is their client, whoever's their client, after the sale is done. And the example I gave you yesterday was like, if you call them on Monday to see if they moved in okay on the weekend. So obviously it's your customer and the deal's done because they already moved in. So sometimes they'll give you the answer in a roundabout way. But before you look at the answers, think to yourself, follow up. What do I know about it? Okay, contacting my clients after the deal's over. Then I start reading the answers to find the answer that's closest to what I believe the perfect answer would be. So you study and you have that in your brain, and then you look for the answer that's as close as possible. And that's how you have to kind of attack this test. Number 3, would you all get?
A.
It is A, absolutely. So you're allowed to appraise property as long as you charge a flat fee based upon how difficult you think it is for you. So what I charge to do an appraisal is different than anyone else. Everyone has their own price. It's how much I value my time and how much of my time I think it's going to take. So I might value my time very high, but because I'm so good, it doesn't take me very long. So what I charge is actually cheaper than somebody else who's brand new, because the brand new person might not give themselves as much credit per hour, but they think it's going to take them several hours to do it. So everyone has their own price and everyone is correct because you value your own time as you see fit. And if people are willing to pay you that, they value your time as well. So as long as you charge a flat fee and you don't represent yourself as being a licensed appraiser, because there is a separate license for appraisers, but a real estate agent is allowed to do appraisals as one of the 8 things, the services of real estate. Remember yesterday, a bar sale, the acronym: appraise, buy, auction, rent, sell, advertise, lease, exchange. Those are all the services you can provide to a client. And so appraisal is one of those things. Okay. But you know what? I want to show you another good example. I want to give you a good hint when you're taking a test. Beware of the word only, or another word like always or never. If something is only, it can only happen one way. But there's not a lot of things in this book that's only this and only that and only this and only that. There's a lot of could be, should be, might be, maybe. But the word only is very limiting. So usually it's not the right answer. Okay. So if we look at B, it says only if you call the appraisal a CMA. Why would you call an apple an orange? A CMA, a BPO, and an appraisal are 3 completely different things. So you wouldn't use them interchangeably. C, provided the compensation is based upon commission. That's exactly what you're not supposed to do. You don't base it upon the value of the property. And then D, provided a licensed or certified appraiser signs the appraisal report. Why do you have to have somebody who has a different license sign off on your work? So if you read through them, you can eliminate the ones it can't be through logic. Even if you're not sure what the right answer is, you can get rid of the answers that just don't make any sense. Okay, so number 4, what did y'all get? By the way,
C.
I put C.
yes, it is. By the way, I had this one on the state exam, exactly word by word, and the answer was word by word. Exactly. I remember it clear as if I took the test yesterday instead of 30 some odd years ago. So that question's been around a long time. So obviously property management has been growing steadily since then, at least. Because I took the state exam, yeah, it's almost 30 years ago. when I got my sales associate license. Yeah. Okay. So number 5, what'd you get?
A.
It
A.
is A. Absolutely. When you see this USPAP, that's the standard format that when you do an appraisal, what it has to look like, how the information has to be presented. And so you only have to follow those specific guidelines if you're doing an appraisal. If you're doing a CMA or a BPO, you don't have to follow USPAP. Only if you call it appraisal, because appraisal is a licensed profession. And if you're going to do an appraisal, you have to follow the same rules that licensed appraisers follow. And when we do the appraisal chapter, we'll talk about those rules, but we don't need to worry about them for now. Okay, number 6, what'd y'all get?
I also got A.
It is A. Absolutely. So they want to know, why do they have to charge like a fee and not a percentage? A, because if you had it based upon percentage of value, you'd be tempted to exaggerate the value higher because you're going to get a percentage of it. So to keep a conflict of interest, they say it has to be a flat rate, negotiated from the beginning based upon how difficult you believe it is to be for yourself. And if the person agrees to pay you, yay. So, also in the state exam, they could give you another question about this. They could say, which of the following is true? An appraiser must charge $500. Or B, an appraiser must charge less than $1,000. C, an appraiser traditionally charges anywhere from $300 to $700. D, none of the above. What do you think the answer would be?
Probably closer to the 500. You got to charge a flat fee.
Yeah, but I used a very naughty word in the answer. Do you know what that naughty word was?
Only.
In one of the answers, I said only, and then in the other ones, I said must. Do you must charge $500? No.
No, ma'am.
No.
Must is like only. Like you can only charge $500. No, you can charge whatever you like as long as the person agrees to pay it to you. So, and even though traditionally appraisers do normally charge somewhere between $300 to $700, you can't even say that. You have to just say it's negotiable. Every single thing in this book and everything in real estate, that is your answer. When they ask you about how much for this and how much for that, the answer is it's negotiable. So I tell you what my fee is. You say whether you agree to pay for it or not. Maybe you make me a counter offer. I agree or I don't. And we negotiate in everything. That's your best answer when it comes to any of those things. Okay, like it's definitely not B because custom dictates the method of compensation. No. C, the fee would be too high if based on a percentage. Well, we believe that, but not necessarily, because maybe the person doesn't value it high or maybe the percentage is so low. And D, only brokers and sales associates are paid commission for their services? No. You're not supposed to get commission on appraisals. 7, what do you got? You're looking for the not true thing, by the way.
B.
I put B.
It is B.
B.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, when you have something that's true or false or not, so that's the false thing, you have to think what is true. The 5 areas of real estate: residential, commercial, agricultural, industrial, buying and selling businesses. Those are the 5 areas that are true. And then we look down there, agriculture, bing, yes. Commercial, bing, yes. Businesses, bing, yes. The only one that's not true is special use. Okay, number 8. What do you have?
B again.
B.
B.
It is. And that's a good example of the longest answer. So when you see on the state exam, 3 of the answers are like one word, like short and sweet, and then one is longer than the rest, usually that's the right answer. Or vice versa. You see 3 really long answers and one of them's one word. the one word. The one that's different is usually your best answer. Okay, number 9.
C.
I put C.
Yes, absolutely. Track homes, spec homes, model homes, you're building without having a buyer. You're building it and hoping somebody will like it. But custom homes is when a buyer says, this is what I want you to build on this piece of land, and I want it to look like this. Okay. Number 10. What do you guys have? Dedication only has one meaning in real estate.
A.
It's a gift of land from an owner to government for the public to use. So like the example yesterday, I was talking about Disney. It could be, self-interest. It could be generous. Somebody donates land for someone to build a park, a baseball field. Do you know that when Orlando first had Orlando Magic, there was downtown, it was the Tupperware Center. So there was the stadium where, that they tore down. And the city of Orlando didn't want to have a professional basketball team because they said, it's going to cost too much money because it has to be, like in a downtown area, and the land is too expensive. And, we didn't have a team. So who's going to pay to come watch? So very smart business person donated the land for them to build the stadium on. And they said, we'll give you the land for free. So you don't have to pay for the land. And we allow you to, build the stadium here with one condition. And they're like, okay, what is it? That we keep the vending rights. So the vending rights is the rights to sell everything, to sell the t-shirts, the popcorn, the beer, the hot dogs. So what makes more money? Like the vending rights, everything that inside that you sell, that makes incredible amount of money. So imagine you have a piece of land and you convince the government to build a business for you to generate income for you. You don't care what they do with the tickets for the game, or if it's an opera, if it's basketball, if it's football, you don't care. But if you have all of that to sell hot dogs and beer and everything else, you make a lot of money and you didn't have to invest anything because you already had the land. So that's how that happened. And that was an example of dedication. So number 11, what do you guys have?
C.
Oh, I put C.
That is, yep. And then 12.
C.
C as well.
C.
It is C. It is C. Yeah. Specializing in a part of town or a type of property is called farming. And when you go out farming, you're considered to be a farmer, but a farm area is not required, but that's the terminology they use. So if you call and they say, oh, the broker's out farming, that doesn't mean they're out there with the shovels and the pitches and the hose. Well, they might be up. That's a different thing. Okay. Number 13. What do y'all have?
I put D for this one.
It is a CAM
did.
license is for condos. Do you have to have a CAM license? Maybe. If it's more than 10 units and the budget is more than $100,000 for the year. Now, does a person with a CAM license also have to have a real estate license?
No.
Oh man.
Nope, you're correct. They don't. The only time you have
No,
to have a real
ma'am.
estate, thank you. The only time you have to have a real estate license is if you're trying to rent the condos or sell the condos. Okay, number 14.
C.
It is C. Oops, I did not want that. I want that. Okay, correct. And then 15.
B as in Bob.
B.
It is B. Yep. they're charging $50 for a CMA, which is true. First of all, can you charge for your work?
Yes, ma'am, you can, as long as you don't
You
present
can
it as an appraisal.
with a guideline. Yep, within
Yeah.
guidelines.
Yeah, exactly. So now you don't have to follow USPAT because it's not an appraisal. You can charge whatever you want. If you want to charge $1,000 for a CMA, first of all, congratulations. 'Cause
Uh,
they're
what,
not
what,
really worth it.
I'm sorry, Miss Linda. What is
Yeah.
typical going rate for that?
Okay, that's a great question. That is a great question.
Ma'am, I'm erring on the side of I sold private equity before I got into this,
Yes. So let me tell you,
so I'm always looking at valuations.
yes. So this is really interesting. I'm glad you asked this question. So CMAs is finding out what else is on the market and people doing that. Now, Zillow, you can do it for free. You can look up different properties and stuff. And a BPO was really popular. When the crash started to happen, they were paying about $150 to do a BPO. And there were people making money doing BPOs. Because the crash was happening, people weren't making money, helping buyers with real estate because the market was crashing and people weren't buying anything. And then when it crashed a lot, then investors did buy and gobble up, properties that had been foreclosed on. But all of these realtors, how are they going to make money? A lot of them did BPOs. And so what they did is they went out and they took pictures. I know because I did them. And you go out and you take pictures of the property and you do almost like a mini appraisal and you compare it. And so you're letting the bank know, hey, this property in this neighborhood usually goes for this amount of money. And that way the bank they can judge for themselves. But BPOs, the prices after the crash, they start going down, 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 down. And then unfortunately, some people got clever and they're having it done offshore, like in India or the Philippines. And that's not right because BPOs should be done by a local person that knows the market. Somebody that's not even in Florida. Forget about overseas. If you're not in Orlando, you can't tell me what Orlando's worth. You know what I mean? You know how when one side of the street is really popular and you know it because you live there, for some reason.
Sure. I've been Coney Island my entire life.
Yeah. So this corner could be more valuable than the corner over there. And you're like, I don't understand. I can see it. It's catty corner. It's in the same area. It's on the same street. But one corner attracts people for whatever reason, And so you can only know that if you're a local person. So, there's movies out about The Big Short and different things. There's a lot of other reasons why the crash happened. And I was telling people for 4 years before the crash happened why it was going to happen. And I could see it coming like a wave. And I told class after class after class after class, and I was saying, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. So it was like a perfect storm of a lot of things that all happened simultaneously. And it started in 2004. And what happened in 2004 in Florida, we got hit with 4 hurricanes, one after the other. And it devastated, so many houses. And so that helped because people had to go buy something else, and why the other things being rebuilt.
That raised our market value.
Yeah. So there's more. So then Katrina happened. And that was the 4th one because Katrina also hit Florida, but of course it hit Louisiana so much worse. And so what we had is
that was the second end of my deployment.
So it was the 4th for my house to get hit in that year. Because I got hit by Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and then Katrina. And so 30
there's many more here.
Yeah, so 33,000 people lost their homes, and then so that's 33,000 people that need a home, right? And the other thing that happened at the time there was, you know, everything was going up, going up, going up, going up in value. And then Bush, and I call him Baby Bush, not Daddy Bush, but Baby Bush. Okay. Baby Bush was running for office, and
Sure.
the stock market was going up, going up, going up, and everyone said it's going to crash because what goes up must come down. And so there was a rumor of a recession, and it was just a rumor, but to avoid, you know, because the real estate market is the backbone of the economy, because everything bleeds out from that. So if a person's buying a house, then they're going to buy furniture, they're going to buy paint, they're going to buy Home Depot. So there's all these industries that are directly and indirectly affected when you buy a house, because owners spend more money on their property, right? Like we said yesterday.
Yes, ma'am.
So what happened at the same time, to help the stimulation, Bush deregulated the mortgage industry. And this is what people don't talk about. And this is what I talked about for the whole time. So I have 30 different licenses for different things. And one of them is a mortgage broker. And
Okay.
to be a broker, it's not too difficult to be a mortgage lender. And you're probably saying, oh my God, you have to have a lot of money to be a lender, you know, to be able to give people loans. No, not really. All you have to do legally to be a lender is have $25,000 in the bank or in assets. So it doesn't even have to be cash. It could be you have a car worth 25,000 or property or whatever. And so
I garnered that from a fight career.
it's all you have to do to be a lender. Now, lenders
Wow.
can choose who to
Okay.
give a loan to or not. But then you're probably saying, well, if they don't have the money, how can they give someone money to buy a house? Well, that's where, you know, FHA and VA, and we're going to talk about that in the mortgage chapter. What happens is the government backs up these loans, and when you process a loan as a lender, you can run it through a computer program called desktop underwriting. And it goes through and it, you know, it gives it little, it's like a grade. And it says if that loan fits the guidelines to be resold to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae. You've heard these names before, and you're going to learn about this
Yes, ma'am.
when we do the mortgage chapter. So I don't have to have a penny in my bank account. Well, to get the license, I have to show I have 25,000 in equity, right? But to give somebody a loan to buy a house, I don't have to, because I can put it through the program. I only approve people for a loan who meet the guidelines, and that I can instantly on the closing table sell the loan directly to the government. And so that's what happened, is that all of these really bad loans. So lenders who, you know, I'm not a bank, but I could be a private lender, were approving these loans without looking for verification of the person having a job. They didn't bother. They didn't care if they had income, debt to income ratio. They didn't care. You know, if you're breathing and you can sign your signature, that's all that matters, because they were selling the loan. And then that's where other movies like The Big Short, they were taking all these loans. Now, one little other piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
So the stock market was going up for so long that people that have a lot of money in the stock market were saying it's going to crash. We need to pull the money out and reinvest it into something else. Well, they pull it out. Where's a good place to invest it? In real estate. Historically, up until that time, real estate went 12% increase per year in value. Like 1% a month, real estate went up in value. So that's a nice, safe thing, because you always have a physical asset. Even if the people don't pay their loan, foreclose on them, evict them, resell the property, you have something physical. So people, you know, that invested heavy in the stock market, pull their money out, invest in real estate. Where is it cheap to invest in real estate? At that time, Florida. A nice house, brand new, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, was like $89,000 back then. And then what you happen is people from New York that are used to paying a lot more for real estate, you know, the same house that you could buy for $89,000 in Florida is like $800,000 in New York. And it doesn't even have the land that we have. So people, even if the house was overpriced, people in New York thought it was still a deal. So what happened is the prices started going up because people thought it was still a good price compared to their market. So getting back to the whole point, you can't have somebody living in New York or California buying a house in Florida and know how much it's worth, because to them, real estate costs a lot more. Now, if you go the opposite way, somebody in Mississippi is going to think Florida's expensive because their property's cheaper. So you can't get somebody who's not local to appraise a property. And so getting back to your question about the BPOs, they started out at $150, went down, $50, $35. Now I see even $15 they're offering to pay somebody. But that's because somebody's letting other people do it in India or the Philippines, where where the labor is really cheap, and that's how they're doing it so cheap. So those people ruin the market for the rest of us. Also, can you imagine, what are they saying the property's worth? Do they know? I don't think so. Google Earth doesn't tell you everything, right? Okay, so that's chapter 1. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Yes. Okay. Let's go to chapter 2. Wizzy. I'm going to go to chapter 2. Sorry if I'm gonna make you dizzy. Oh, so keep going. There we are. Okay. Interesting. Let's look at number 1. Can you tell me some interesting things about the question or the answer? Do you notice anything? Anything? First of all, what answer did you get?
I put A.
Okay, A is true,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the best answer.
Okay.
It's true.
B, it's the longest correct answer.
There you go. Oops, hello. What's that about? Let me see. Maybe I might. Okay. There we go. Yeah, it
I
is.
was taking my counterpart to just erred on the side of 2 being B, as I'm rereading it, but it has to be it.
So, both of them say 4, right? Let's look at the question. There's a really important word. May. When you say may, the answer could be anything and everything. You know, I may do this, I might do that, I could do this, I should do that, I will do that, but it's not must. Be careful on an exam of the word may or must in the question or in the answers themselves. When it's may, yeah, there's a lot of things you may do. If it said they must, probably the answer is none of the above, because there's not many things in here in the book that you must do. There's like a handful of things, and they're all in chapter 5 that you must do. You may do this. So A is true. You can work for any broker. What's more true, work for a broker who turns around and registers you under license. That's a better answer. C it's not correct, because independently if registered with the DBPR, you don't register with the DBPR. Your broker registers you with the DBPR. So the word registration and licensure we talked about is 2 different things. To be registered means you're under the responsibility So a broker registers you as a sales associate underneath their license. And they let the DVPR know. D, as a broker associate, they could if they pass the broker's exam, but D is kind of right, but it doesn't have enough information. So you can work as a broker associate if you're qualified to be a broker and choose not to use it and continue to work as if you're a sales associate. So it could be true, but you have a better answer available. And like you said, Dorian, B is the best, longest correct answer when there's more than one correct answer. Okay, number 2, what do you have? You're looking for the not true thing. What are you not required to do? Well, let's do this
C.
experiment.
C.
Be a
It is-
Florida resident.
Yes, you're right. So let's pretend, oops, I don't want that. It's so sensitive. Okay. Let's say you don't know what they are, but you can say in your mind, okay, forget about the true or the false in the question. Let's just look at the answers. True or false? Do you have to submit an application fee with the application?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Do you have to be at least 18 years old?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes. Do you have to live in Florida?
No.
You don't must. And by the way, when you see the word required, it's the same as the word must. So improper English, but do you must live in Florida? No, you don't must live in Florida. You could, you might, you may, but you don't must. You have to. You could live anywhere in the world and have a Florida license, a New York license, a California license, and you could be in Hawaii selling real estate online. Possess a social security number. Do you have to possess one? Yes. So A, B, and D are all true. And that's why the answer, the only thing that you don't have to do is C. Okay, number 3, what do you have? And it's not. Which person does not meet the criteria that's required? So let's just go down the line. To be a Florida broker, and you're looking, first of all, you're looking for the thing that's not true, but if that's too confusing, let's just look at the answers and say yes or no. Can an applicant have an active California broker's license for 3 years to become a broker in Florida? How many years do you have to have an active license to become a broker?
2 years.
2.
2 years. Exactly. So 3 years is more than 2 years. So yay. B, an applicant has held an active Ohio sales associate license during 4 of the last 5 years. 4 is more than 2. So that one's okay. C, an applicant who has held an active Florida sales associate license for the preceding 2 years while employed by a Florida broker. Okay, that's perfect. And then D, an applicant who has held an active Florida sales associate license during 2 of the preceding 5 years while employed by an owner developer. Why
Your
does
time under
that?
an owner developer doesn't count.
That's right. And why doesn't it count, Dorian?
Because it's not a brokerage. The owner developer is not required to have a real estate license. They develop their
Correct.
own property and they sell their own property.
Correct. So you could work for a developer and you're doing real estate transactions, but your time doesn't count because they're not licensed, so they're not supervising you. They don't know what it takes to be licensed, so that's why it is C. The first part was okay. The applicant has an active Florida sales associate license during 2 out of the previous 5 years. That's okay. What makes it wrong is you worked for an owner developer. So that's not the same as working for a licensed broker. And that's why it's D. Number 4. What is on the face of the real estate license? That's a unusual question. We usually don't talk about what's on the prima facie evidence. The right answer is C. You have the license number. you don't have the signature of the governor or the DVPR secretary or your email address. That's not what's printed on your license number. But if you didn't know that, if you look through them, you probably would go for license number because it makes the most sense what appears on your license, like your driver's license. You maybe never paid attention to what's on it, but you know your license number is on it. You don't know if the governor signs your driver's license or if there's any kind of signature on there. Number 5, you do not have to disclose on your application. If you convicted a crime, do you have to put that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes. B, do you have to be a US citizen?
Yes.
No.
Ma'am,
you
you do not.
No, you can be a resident. And as long as you possess a social security number, it cracks me up. I'm sorry, because, again, possess means I have it, if I take it from you, I'm possessing your social security number. Sorry. If you have a maiden name that's different than your current name, do you have to put that on that application? Yeah. And then D, if you're found guilty of this, that, or the other, yes, you have to put that on the application. Number 6. 2 different brokerage. Real estate licensee works on commission basis for 2 different brokerage. First of all, are you allowed to work for 2 different brokerages simultaneously?
No, ma'am, not unless you're a broker.
Correct. So the sales associate cannot. However, there's one exception. If you work as a salary for one, then you technically don't have to activate your license underneath because you don't need a license to make a salary. And then a lot of people ask me, hey, can I work at Westgate and then sell houses on the weekend? You could, if one of them you get paid commission and the other one you get paid a salary. You just can't make commission from 2 different companies because whoever you get commission from, they have to put your license underneath their license. So, but if you get paid a salary, you don't even have to have a license to begin with. So, so A is true. A sales associate may only have 1 registered employer at any given time. Okay, number 7, the Latin phrase for no contest is noli contendere. And number 8, let's see, it's a long one. John is an active Marine, order to relocate to Florida, spouse of valid real estate broker in Tennessee, where they have currently lived. Wants to continue her career as a real estate broker in Florida. The spouse may get it by spouse may get a license by. Okay, these are all really big answers. The smallest one is probably C. So let's break it down. Okay, when they say Marine, so they're military, and whether it's the military person or their spouse, the rule is the same. When you move to a different area because the government sent you there, it shouldn't be a punishment to you. So they allow you to have a temporary license right away. And if you want to continue to live in here, then you would eventually have to go through all the steps to become licensed. So let's take a look at which one. A, completing a license by mutual agreement application, providing proof of spouse's military status, submitting fingerprints for background check, and passing the state law exam. I like that. B, completing a license by exam or broker application, providing proof of spouse's military status, fingerprints, background check, passing pre-license education for broker, and passing the state exam. Did it ever tell us how many years that they worked in Tennessee?
No, but they're already a broker there, so they would have had to work 2 years already.
Correct. And then C, completing a license by endorsement application. Endorsement application, there is no such thing. D, completing a license by exam for a sales associate application. You don't have to go be a sales associate. You can go directly to be a broker. So it's not C. It's not D. We have A and B as possibilities, and let's tear it apart. Completing license by mutual agreement application. Okay, is Tennessee one of the states that there is mutual recognition? So, which states have mutual recognition in Florida? Alabama, Arkansas, Connecticut, Georgia, Illinois, Kentucky, Mississippi, Nebraska, Rhode Island, and West Virginia. So it cannot be A because there is no mutual recognition with Tennessee. So by process of elimination, the better answer is B. By the way, you don't even have to be a broker in the other state. If you work anywhere in any state and you have your license for at least 2 years, you don't have to start back down at 0 as a sales associate. You've completed the experience requirement and you could apply to be a broker in Florida and skip the whole sales associate process. And it's experience anywhere in the world. So you could have been a broker in Canada or broker in London. And as long as you have experience, then you could apply to be a broker rather than a sales associate. London was a bad example because they don't have real estate licenses in England. In England, anybody can just call themselves a real estate agent. You don't have to go through any requirements because the people who write the contracts are barristers, you know, like lawyers. And basically the person that takes you around to see the house is just like Vanna White type of thing. Okay, number 9. This is an interesting question.
B.
Okay, yes. So Freck refuses to find you qualified. So what does that really mean? If Freck refuses to say you're qualified, it really means they find you unqualified. So then you look at it, which person is unqualified to get a license? Are you unqualified if you dropped out of high school but later got a GED? No. Are you unqualified if you committed fraud in an insurance scam? Yeah. C. Are you unqualified if you just changed your address, if you moved from another state? No problem there. D. If you lost a lot of your own money in a bad investment? No problem there. I mean, there's a problem, but it's your problem. Okay, number 10. What do you all have?
B.
It should be A.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote it in the wrong.
It's okay. By the way, I maybe didn't stress this enough yesterday. We talked about what's the definition of a Florida resident. I mentioned it, but I didn't stress it. So if you lived here for 4 months, you're considered to be a Florida resident when it comes to real estate. It's not true when it comes to other things like when you're trying to get married or a divorce, or you're trying to get in-state tuition or other things. That has different definitions. But when it comes to real estate, if you've lived here at least 4 months, then you're considered to be a resident. If you're already a resident, then you can't take the shortcut for mutual recognition. Mutual recognition is when you don't have to take the class. You can just do an application, take the state exam, and take a 40-question test. But you can't do that if you're living in Florida. It's to help people who are outside of Florida who want to have an additional license. So if you have a license in a mutually recognized state, Alabama, Arkansas, Connecticut, etc., and you want to get another one for Florida, then it makes the process easier. But if you already live in Florida, you can't take the shortcut. Number 11, the answer is A. And number 12, the answer
one's B.
is B. Yes. And Oh, and here's the key. It doesn't matter that it's North Carolina. It matters that it's your own property. You never have to have a license to sell, buy, do anything with your own property because it's your risk. 13 is D. 14. Ooh. This is a good one. 14. What did you guys get? If you don't do your post license on time, what happens to your license?
Null and void.
Null and void. I'm sorry about that, Dorian.
Yeah, no worries.
So you got to start all over again. You got to requalify from the beginning like you never had a license. New application, fingerprints, state exam, take the school exam, all that stuff. But what's interesting is the word must, is, and must. Normally, if I was guessing, and if I was in a hurry, I would have guessed C just because it's different. Because A, B, and D all have the word must in front of it. And C has is. So if I wasn't reading and if I was just guessing because I was running out of time on the state exam, I probably got that one wrong. Which of the following is not a real estate transaction, considered a real estate service? Is advertising a real estate service?
Yes.
Is appraising?
Yes.
Is selling cemetery lots?
No.
No,
No.
ma'am.
No.
Even though you're dying to get in the neighborhood. So the answer is C. Thank you for laughing along with me. I'm laughing at my own jokes. I'm glad somebody else is laughing with me. 16. Oh, which one is best answer? Gotta be the longest one. It's D.
D.
Every one of these answers is true. Just one gets better than the next. And they said which one is the best. So remember the definition. Anyone who performs any of the real estate services, yes. Anyone who performs services for another person, yes. Anyone who performs services for another person for compensation, yes. Anyone who performs service for compensation unless they're exempt by law. Bing, 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 bing. Number 17, not exempt. So exempt means you don't have to, but you're not don't have to, which means you do have to. So it's a double negative kind of thing. And which of the people are not exempt, meaning they have to? The answer is D, because the salary isn't the problem, it's the bonuses. If you receive a bonus, that's commission. If you receive commission, you have to have a real estate license. 18, the answer is D, and it is different. The other ones are must. Number 19, the answer is D. By the way, there's one on the state exam like this, but I think it says it's the daughter instead of a son. But let's look at this one together. The developer bought land, divided it. Okay. He hired his son. Okay. Who doesn't have a license. Okay. The father agreed to pay the son a salary. Okay. After 2 weeks, the son had only sold 2 lots, so the father wanted to add an incentive. Aha. Incentive, motivation. The father promises on every 5th deal he would sell, he would give his son a free lot. Okay, it's free, but it has value. So he's expecting something in return for doing a better job, which is commission. And if you have commission, you need a license. So then it says the son quit his job to go work for another developer who paid him more weekly salary. What a terrible son. Lazy. So that part has nothing to do with the equation. Which statement applies? Well, forget about working for another developer. What the father and the son did, both of them are wrong. The father knows better. If he paid a salary, that's fine. But the moment he added an incentive, it was compensation based upon your work level, whether you're successful or not. So That's commission. And the son, maybe he doesn't know any better, but ignorance is not an excuse when it comes to real estate. And number 20, FBI. Huh, as soon as you see FBI, that's scary. The right answer is A, by the way, longest answer. So it says 6 months ago. Does it really matter? 6 months, 10 months, a year? FBI has a file on you. You got to be one of two people. Either you're a victim or the criminal, and I don't think they're talking about victims. So then it says you were accused of arson. Okay. In order to collect insurance money. Okay. I don't think this person's going to get a real estate license. That's very serious, especially you're going to be around buildings. And then it says they went to court and he pled no contest. Well, who cares? He decided not to fight, but that's a serious issue. The FREC has received the application. What do you think will happen? Well, in the book, it used to say they will not get a license, but now they want to be politically correct. Well, they will look at their application, they will consider it, and then they're going to refuse them. But at least it says, like they're giving them a chance. So any questions about the first two chapters? Oh, look.
No, ma'am.
No, I can't have the doggy. Oh,
Sorry, she's trying to join the class.
yeah, no, let her come here. I'll babysit the doggy. Okay, any questions from the first two chapters?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so let's take a small break. At 7:15, let's jump into chapter 3. Give you a little tiny break, okay? And then we'll get rolling.
Are we doing 10 or 15?
Well, come back at 7:20. How about that?
10 floor.
All right.
Thank you. Alrighty. Here we go. Chapter 3. Okay, this chapter is all about getting your license. So it's all about the laws about getting your real estate license, keeping your license. That's what this chapter is about. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. We talked about pre-licensure, post-licensure, and continuing education, but we're going to get into a little bit more detail. There will be some repetition because it is. There's not a lot of key terms. Oh, by the way, on the on the state exam, there is 2 questions from this chapter. So if you want to write that down, 2 questions, so that way, I like to put it at the beginning of the chapter to think about how much attention do I really want to spend on this chapter. I don't know if that's me. Okay, so on this page, we can highlight this. The purpose of this unit is to explain in detail about the Florida Real Estate Commission, FREC for short, FREC. And FREC is an independent body. We're going to talk about the composition. Oh, by the way, Michael, as in my son, as in Michael Cameron, he is running for to be a FREC member. And he has to have so many names on a petition. So after I explain all of this stuff in the chapter, I'll share with you like a QR code if you want to sign the petition. You get appointed by the governor. So people need to nominate you, and people sign a petition. It's a voluntary position. You don't get paid for it. It's just something that you do to be professional and to help influence the direction that real estate is going into. And you have to have experience, and we'll talk all about that. Okay, so just so you get your acronyms straight, DBPR, DBEPR, as Dorian said yesterday, that is the Department of Business and Professional Regulations. So they're different agencies. FREC is a group of people who basically are doing volunteer work to help keep the profession professional. And the DBPR is actually a licensing board for the state of Florida. So the people who work at the DBPR actually are employees. They are salaried workers. And the people who are a part of FREC are volunteers, just giving up their time for the industry. So what is the purpose of having people have a real estate license? It is to protect the public. So if you want to highlight this. So they protect the public because think about when you do your application, they know your name, your address, your birthday, your social, your driver's license. They know where to find you, right? So this is a part of the licensure process. If a stranger were to help you with real estate, they could cause harm or rip you off, and there would be nothing. So remember yesterday we said until 1923, there was no such thing in Florida as having a real estate license. So it's not that old. It's basically the last 100 years. So until 1925, exactly 100 years ago, they didn't have a way to enforce it if somebody did something wrong. There was no, you did the crime, but there was nobody to enforce the punishment. So the FREC was created, the DBPR was created to protect the public because, there could be dangers financially or physically. Imagine you sell somebody property that's in a toxic area, those things. So by having a license, the threat is to take away your license. And remember, you have to have a license to get commission. So if they take away your license, then you don't have any, livelihood. So they protect the public by requiring you to have a license to begin with. Let's take a look. You don't need to know anything about this chart. It's too much information. Let's talk about the DRE. Let's go down. Let's skip all of this stuff. By the way, there's a different division for timeshare condominiums, because that's what timeshare is a condominium, and also mobile homes. So they have their own separate little department that specialize in protecting people that are buying those things. DRE, Division of Real Estate. So we have all of these separate entities. FREC, again, I said they're volunteers. Division of Real Estate is underneath the umbrella of the DBPR. Let me see if I have if there's a whiteboard. I know that there's a whiteboard somewhere. Let me see. I forgot how to do this. How to do a whiteboard. Okay, well, because I can't remember how to do it. It's been a while since I've used this platform. So we have different areas. A big umbrella, the DBPR, as we looked yesterday, we went to the website for myfloridalicense.com, and that is for the DBPR, DBPR, and that is the agency that manages every type of professional license in the state of Florida. And underneath it are all these separate divisions for different professions. So you have division of cosmetology, division of real estate, you have division of hospitality, of restaurants, of alcohol, tobacco. There's all these different separate divisions. So we do an application to have a real estate license. What happens to that application? It goes to the DBPR. They are the big branch. So it goes up to Tallahassee. That's where they're located. And they receive it electronically because you do it online. And they say, oh, it's real estate. We're going to give that down to the division of real estate because that's their specialty. So you have the big umbrella, the DBPR. Underneath them, the division of real estate that actually does all of the processing of the application. In the meantime, your fingerprints are coming in from, the FBI is doing your background check, and then they send a report to the division of real estate, and they let them know this person has, some criminal background or not. If you have something and they say, oh, we have to think about it, whether we should let this person have a license or not, what happens is they kind of put your application to the side, and that's when FREC gets involved. They're going to send the application over to FREC, which is a bunch of volunteers that we're going to talk about in a minute. They're kind of like your peers. You could think of them like a jury. What the heck? What's that? Don't know where that sound came from. So you have your peers like a jury. They look it over and they give their opinion. Now, they give their opinion, but that doesn't mean the division of real estate has to agree. So they listen to FREC, what they have to say. The division of real estate makes a decision, and then they let the DBPR know. So the DBPR is the one that actually has communication with you. The DBPR is the one on the website. You do your application. They're the ones that are going to send you a letter like you're approved or not approved. And when you pass your state exam, they are the ones that actually issue the license itself. So there are three separate things. So to the side, you have FREC. It's a group of volunteers. We're going to talk about that in the next couple pages. Over here, you have government employees. You have the DBPR, which is a big umbrella that covers all the different professions, and that's called Division of Real Estate, which is the one that we care about. Okay, so that's that. Let's go to the next page. Let's talk about FREC. So FREC, short for the Florida Real Estate Commission. Like I said, it's a voluntary base. And it's a group of people, and there's 7 members to this jury that is FREC, and it has a very specific composition of how many of this and how many of that, which is what they break it down right here. So FREC is 7 members. 5 of the 7 people have to be people with a real estate license. But out of that 5, 4 of them have to be brokers who have had at least 5 years experience. So they want people who really know the industry. The 5th one could be a broker or a sales associate, and they only have to have 2 years experience. The 2 remaining people have to be consumers, and this is very important for the state exam. They have to be consumers who have never, ever, 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 ever had a real estate license. So it can't be somebody that had a real estate license 20 years ago. They're not considered a consumer. They want people that don't have any previous knowledge. They want their opinion, their feedback, because if the average person can understand the rules or the laws, there's no excuse why anyone can't. So they want the opinion of 2 people that are novices, that don't have a real estate license. Past, present, future is a different thing. So out of the 7 people, 5 of them have to have a real estate license. 2 of them, no real estate license. Out of the 5, 4 of them have to be active brokers with at least 5 years experience. The 5th one could be a sales associate or a broker, and they only have to have 2 years experience, and that's okay. So you have 7. Out of the 7, it doesn't matter which one, but at least one of them has to be an elder. What's considered to be an elder? In this definition, it's on line 20, at least one person who's 60 years older or older. So in all the different chapters, there's different definitions of what a senior citizen is. You know, for some things it's 55 years old, something it's 60, some things it's 62, some things it's 65. So you have to be specific. What are you talking about? So when they talk about an elder, when it comes to the FREC board, it's somebody who's at least 60 years old. And it doesn't matter if that's a licensed person or an unlicensed person, but they want the opinion of somebody who's older. Now, all of them could be 80, 90 years old, but they, one person has to be at least 60 years old. I kind of felt that inauguration. I mean, I looked around and man, they were all really old, looking at all of the previous presidents and everything. I mean, I don't think anybody was less than 70 years old that was up there. Actually, I don't think anyone was less than 80 years old. It was kind of interesting. First time, seen that in our history. Okay, so that's the composition of FREC. These people are volunteers. They give up their time. How are they chosen? Every new governor gets to choose their group of 7 people. Now, if we know American history, a little bit about politics, supposedly not one hand has the ultimate power, so there has to be a check and a balance. So a governor can appoint somebody, but appoint doesn't mean you're in. It means you're recommended for the position, but then you have to have the state senate confirm the appointment. Confirm means to agree or approve the recommendation. The recommendation is what we call an appointment. So an appointment to be a FREC member is the governor chose you, and then the Senate has to approve your nomination. Now, they serve 2 years. Sorry, I don't serve 2 years. I meant 2 terms. How long does a governor serve? 4 years, right? How many times can a governor serve in a row? Twice. So FREC members can do the same like governors do. They can go away for a while and come back later, but you can't do more than 2 consecutive terms because then it's considered like a monopoly if you keep going and going and going. But remember, they are volunteers. They do perhaps get a little bit of money, which is on line 8. They don't get a salary, but what they do get potentially is $50 a day when they're on official business. So they have meetings once a month in Orlando, and the $50 is to cover their out-of-pocket expenses, their travel, etc. They don't necessarily live in Orlando, but the meetings are in Orlando. So even though the DBPR is in Tallahassee, the Division of Real Estate for the state of Florida happens to be here in Orlando. And every month they have a meeting on the last Tuesday, and you can go. You can sit in there and watch the meetings. They're interesting. You can see what's happening in the real estate world and what they're deciding and if they should change laws, amend laws. Also, they might be discussing people's applications. They might mention the background and somebody did this or that. And if they mention my name, please let me know. Okay, so they meet once a month and they happen to be in Orlando, and they can have a meeting as long as a majority show up for the meeting. And the word for that is called a quorum. Quorum means majority. So if you have 7 people, what's a majority out of 7? 4 people. So as long as 4 people show up for the meeting, they can go ahead and have the meeting. And those 4 people that are there can decide upon things that they discuss. The people that don't show up don't have a voice, because whoever shows up has the right to pass whatever rules or recommendations because they showed up to the meeting. So the 7 people agree that there's like a rubber stamp that represents all of them. It's a seal, you know? And so if people don't show up, bad for them. So the people that do show up for the meeting, as long as there's at least 4, they have a majority, they make a decision, and they use the seal, and then it becomes official. Okay, so the things that they do, they have what's called executive powers, which means they can regulate the licensure process. They can decide how many hours you have to go to school, what is the passing score on the state exam. They use the word foster education. In other words, they make the rules about how much the class has to cover and how many hours you have to be here. Adopt a seal is that stamp that represents everyone's signature. And they decide how much it costs to renew your license. So that's under the umbrella of what's called executive powers. And on the state exam, you need to know all these little things because they could ask you any of the questions, but this chapter only has 2 questions. And it's confusing, so you decide how much time you want to spend. But sooner or later, you got to pick some chapters that you like, because you can't keep saying pass, pass on everything. But there's only 2 questions on the state exam from this chapter. And yesterday, chapter 1 only had 1. Chapter 2 had 6. That's more important. Now, there's another thing called quasi-legislative. Interesting word, quasi. Quasi means, or in Spanish or Italian, I think it's quasi. It means almost, kinda, sort of, like, so-so. So quasi, legislative. So they kind of, sort of have legislative power. What is legislative power? Legislative is the ability to create laws. So they kind of have authority to create new laws. But they don't have authority to create new laws about anything else unless it's real estate related. So it's not like they can go on Capitol Hill and just make up a law and pass it. It has to be in our industry, something related to real estate, but they can pass rules and regulations that have to do with real estate. So they can create rules, bylaws, things about our profession, and things about, like, if you lose a license because you do this and that and the other. So that's what quasi-legislative means. Then we have quasi-judicial, quasi kind of, sort of, and judicial means to judge. So they find you guilty. Yes, kind of. They can't find you guilty of manslaughter or DUI, but they could find you guilty of something real estate related and take away your real estate license. So they can't put you in jail. They could recommend you go to jail, but they can't put you in jail. They can't arrest you. They could take away your real estate license and your ability, to make money. So they could grant or deny approval for your application. They could suspend, revoke your license, or charge you a fine against your license. And they decide if you committed, a minor infraction or a serious major infraction. So they have three different branches. Executive, which is the power itself for the basic things. How much does the license cost? How many hours does it take? What's the education involved? That kind of thing. Then quasi-legislative is to make up new laws, and quasi-judicial is to decide whether you have violated those laws. But again, they cannot put you in jail. They don't have authority to imprison you because they're not police, they're not lawyers, they're volunteers, and they have quasi powers, which means kind of, sort of, almost. Any question about any of that? Okay, so we mentioned this before, and we will mention it again and again. In almost every chapter, there's something about it. You get a license. Right now, you don't have a license, so this class is called pre-license because it's before. Then you get a license. Then after you get the license, you have to do more education, which is called post-licensure requirements. And then after the first renewal, you have to keep up with law changes every 2 years, and that's called continuing education. So to remind you, your license is good for 2 years, but they have these two specific dates that everyone's license expires on, one or the other. If you took the state exam today and passed today, your license wouldn't be good until January 21st of next 2 years from now. They put you in the date closest to March 31st or September 30th, and it cannot go longer, not even 1 day longer than the 2-year period. So you're going to get you as close to 24 months as possible without going over 24 months, even by a day. So basically they go backwards. Now we're January. Which of the two is the closest date going backwards from January? September. So if you took the test today, your license would expire September 2 years from now. And then every September, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, you would need to renew your license if you want to keep it. So if you got your license now, it wouldn't be good exactly for 2 whole years because you're going to lose some time because they're trying to fit you into either a March or a September anniversary date. So as long as it's a minimum of 18 months, but doesn't go over 24 months, that's good. This is important for the state exam because they'll give you an example like this. So for example, this is when you pass the test. When would your license expire? So if this person passed their test in July, what would be their expiration month? If we're going backwards.
31st.
March 31st. Remember, September only has 30 days. That's a trick on the state exam. We'll say something like, you passed your state exam on March 30th of 2023. When would it expire? And the first answer will say March 30th, 2025. And most people go for that answer because it looks good. 2 years from now, you remember March, but March has 31 days. So the second answer would say March 31st, 2025. That's not the right answer either. Because that would be like 2 years plus 1 day. The right answer is it would actually expire September 31st because it has to be the date closest, but behind. So if you took it today, the closest behind you is September. If you took the test in April, the closest behind would be March. And then, of course, it's the last day of the month. March has 31 days and September has 30. So what do you have to do the first time you renew? What's the first renewal called? Do you remember from yesterday?
Post?
Post license. How many hours is post for sales associates?
45.
45. How many hours is post for brokers?
14?
60 for post. And then after the first cycle, only the first cycle is the one where you have to do a bunch of hours. Every 2 years after that is continuing education, which is just to get updated with any new law changes. Sometimes there are no new law changes, so it doesn't take you 14 hours to do that class. You can do it online in a few minutes. But each one has a little test, but no more state exam. The only time you take a state exam is when you get your license. To keep your license, you take a test at the school. Okay, there's an exception if you happen to be in the military. And there's a difference between if you're active and inactive, but let's talk about military first. If you're in the military, you know, and you have a real estate license that's about to expire, it's not like they're going to let you go home to take your post license or even your continuing education. As long as you let the DBPR know that you're on active duty, and if active duty is in Florida, then you should do whatever you need to do because you're in Florida. But usually when you're on active duty, it's when they send you somewhere else. So let's say if you're in Afghanistan, they're not going to expect you to look around to see where you have internet so you can do your 45 hours online. So as long as you let them know, they will put a note on your license that it's not going to expire. It's going to be in limbo until you get discharged, and then you have like 6 months to go do whatever you need to do. You know, they give you an extension. So it could be years from now. Let's say you're on active duty for 6 years and you don't have to do 3 times the classes. You only have to do what was the first requirement of you at that time. So if you go on military duty and you need to do your post license, when you're released from military duty, then you have to do the post license after you've been released. If you're doing continuing education, then that's what it is. Okay, what is active versus inactive status? Well, not everybody who has a license uses it. So if you're working for somebody, you're active, you're underneath a broker. And if you're not, then you're inactive. It's not a negative thing. It's just, what is your status? Are you currently working in real estate or you're not? So you're active or you're inactive. There's 2 types of inactive. You could be voluntarily inactive. That's when you choose, hey, I don't want to work. Or you could be involuntary, where they punish you because you did something wrong. So, you know, it's against you. So voluntary, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go raise a family right now. I don't want to work in real estate right now. You don't lose your license as long as you keep doing that education every 2 years. Of course, pay the renewal fee, and then your status would be, okay, I'm voluntary inactive. Now, if you're being punished your license was suspended because of something you did wrong, that would be inactive. So if you become involuntary inactive, every 2 years you have to do. What happens? Involuntary inactive could be you just didn't renew your license. I don't want you to confuse you. If you miss the first time renewing the post, there's no forgiveness. Your license is null and void. It's gone bye-bye. But let's say you've had a license for 10 years. You're doing continuing education every 2 years. And let's say you let it slip because maybe you're not using your license. They will forgive you for being late. So your status will be involuntary inactive because you let your license go, but you can save and get it back. If you're just 12 months late or less, you just do the normal 14 hours. If it's more than 12 months, but as long as it's less than the full 2 years, even by 1 day, they make you do what's called a 28-hour reactivation class. So on the state exam, it will say, hey, it's been 20 months since your license expired from not doing your continuing education. What can you do, if anything, to get your license back? And then, one answer might say you have to do 14 hours. Another one might say you have to do 2 14-hour classes. So even 2 times 14 is 28. It's not the same thing. The 28-hour reactivation is kind of like a punishment to you for letting it go too long. But you can save it as long as it's been less than 2 years. Once it's been over 2 years that your license has expired, your license is gone. If you miss the post license, your license is gone. So can you reinstate something null and void? No. Null and void means gone bye-bye. You can't bring it back to life. So what are some examples of null and void? Oh, I didn't mean to do all of that. Null and void. So if you've been involuntary inactive for more than 2 years, it becomes null and void. If your license has been revoked, meaning they took it away to punish you, it's null and void. If you don't do your post license, it's null and void. Or if you just don't want to do real estate anymore, you can voluntarily give up your license. It's called voluntary relinquish or cancel your license. Why would somebody call and cancel their license? Why not let it just expire and die on its own? Can you think of any reason? So I can think of, if I know I did something wrong and I just didn't get caught yet, I might want to hurry up and cancel my license. Because if you cancel a license, it's not like they took it away from you. Later on, as time passes, you can be forgiven. And I think after 5 years pass, you could start all over again and get a license. If they caught you while you had the license and revoked it and took it away from you, they wouldn't let you get one back in the future. But if they never punished you and you just canceled your license before something happened, then eventually you could, I'm not saying it's a thing you should do. I'm just saying that's the only reason I can think of somebody canceling their license. There are some people out there, though, they don't like things hanging open. Oh, I'm not going to use it. I don't want them to send me notices. I just don't want to think about it. Let me just get rid of it. But I don't know about you. It's hard, the process to get your license. Once you get it, it's easier to keep it than to let it go. Vocabulary. The words cease to be in force. That's not a punishment. That just means they don't have current information. So if you changed your address or changed your employer and you didn't let them know, then your license ceases to be in force until you give them updated information. It's not a punishment, because you could go ahead and go online and you could change your address or your phone number or your email anytime. Once you do your application online and create a username and password, you can update your information whenever you want to. but there is a deadline. 10 days. So if you move, you got 10 days to let them know what your new address is. Or if you change who you work for, you got 10 days to let them know you're no longer with this broker, you're with another. Your broker is the one who's supposed to notify the DBPR that you're underneath them. However, even though they're supposed to, I would always make sure that they actually do it, because it's an easy thing that can slip through the cracks. So if I were you, I would just keep checking the DBPR website to make sure it shows who my broker is. Oh, you can, let me show you. You can look up anyone's license. Let me show you how you do that. Let me share my whole screen. Entire screen, share. Okay. Oh. Okay, my Florida license.com. So you can search by the person's name or the county or whatever. So let's look at me. Let's make sure I have a license to teach you. Cameron, oh, Linda. There I am. So I am a broker. My license is good until March of 2026. I also am an instructor. It's good until this September, and then I have to renew it.
We can't see.
Oh, okay. I thought I shared the entire screen. Let me do that again. Can you see it now?
No.
No? Really? What am I doing wrong?
It shows the question from earlier, talking about the mutual recognition.
Does it show it now?
Yes.
Okay, so let me go back. So you go to myfloridalicense.com and then you can search by name, and I'm putting in my last name, first name. If you're not sure how they spell their name, you can check the box that says similar or it looks like that. And I could put in, you know, what kind of license I could, here's all the different licenses. I could choose real estate, or I could just put my name and see what pops up. So I'm a broker. My license is currently active until March of 2026. Then I'm also a real estate instructor. And this September, I need to make sure I remember to renew it. And so you can check a person to see if they actually have a license. That's all on the portal. Okay, so let me go back to let's see. That is not what I wanted to do. Screen. Okay. Let's see if that's the right one. Okay, can you see chapter 3?
No.
You don't see this. Okay. All right, here we go. Now you can see chapter 3?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Okay, so these are just examples of different scenarios, and you can practice reading that. In every single chapter, they're going to mention this multiple times. You always have to have your current mailing address. Current mailing address, how many days do you have to let them know what your address is? 10 days. So current mailing address, current email address, you know, that kind of thing. Current mailing address. Now, interestingly enough, a P.O. box is acceptable as a mailing address when it comes to real estate licensure. You know, not other things, like IRS does not like a P.O. box. Your driver's license does not like a P.O. box. But for your real estate license, they don't care. You can have a P.O. box, and that could be your address. Anytime you change address, again, how long do you have? 10 days. if you don't renew that, they can charge you a fine for not having current information. But no matter what, it's 10 days to let them know your new address, or if you change employers, etc. If you move out of the state of Florida, you have to do more than just let them know your new address. You have 10 days to let them know your address, but then you have 60 days to let them know that you want to keep your real estate license, and you're allowed to, but you just have to notify them of that. And you have up to 60 days to do that. So if you change residency, because maybe you move out to California, you think you're going to move there permanently, but then something happens like the wildfire and you come back, or you go somewhere else. So they give you 60 days for you to notify them of where you change your residency, but 10 days, whatever your address is, because they always need to know how to get a hold of you to send you mail. Okay. You don't need any of this stuff here. It's not important. Change of employer. They love this word on the state exam, fiduciary. You have a fiduciary responsibility. It means being trusted with somebody else's money. So since you're going to represent buyers and sellers, you have a responsibility to let them know who you work for. It's really the broker's responsibility to let the DVPR always know, but it's your license. So I would take the other step and always make sure you're up to date. Okay. Can you change employers? Yeah, all the time. Are you allowed to take your listings with you? Maybe. If your broker says you can, then you can. So a lot of people think just because they brought the customer to the brokerage that they belong to them. Nobody belongs to you. Even if you brought them to your broker, they belong to your broker, because you cannot do real estate just on your own. Your license doesn't mean anything unless it's active underneath a broker. And then that broker is responsible for things that you do. So if you make a mistake on a contract, the broker is going to be disciplined because they didn't supervise you correctly. So the broker's in trouble. Now, when you get hired, you might want to ask a broker when you're interviewing, it's not just them interviewing you, it's you interviewing them to see if you want. You might say to them, hey, listen, what happens to all my customers if you decide just to fire me? That's important to know, because you could bring over all your clientele and then they get rid of you and those aren't your clients any longer. You can't call your clients up and say, hey, they fired me, I'm going to go work at this brokerage. You're not allowed to do that. Once you bring clients to the brokerage firm, they belong to the brokerage firm. Now you can negotiate, because everything in real estate is negotiable. You can say to your broker, hey, listen, what's the waiting period before I can contact the clients that I brought to you? 15 days, 30 days, you can negotiate that. So there is no set way. It's not like one way, one and done. It's whatever you talk about and negotiate. But you can't just randomly go in and take company records, files, even if you're the one who brought the actual file folder to the office. If you take it with you when you leave, it's considered theft, like larceny. So you need to have the discussion. What happens if you fire me? What happens to my clients? A lot of times brokers will have something like, okay, you can't contact them for 60 days. And then after that you can. So, but it's negotiable. So there's a fiduciary responsibility both ways. Your broker is on the hook for what you do, and also you have a responsibility to your broker not to go share their secret sauce with everybody. So if they have really good marketing tools or a way they do business or where they find customers, you're not supposed to go broadcast that somewhere else or take those trade secrets and go work for another broker and say, oh, this is how they do it. But you know, that's what people do. So once you have knowledge, it's in there. You can't help it, right? But it's supposed to be a two-way street. You're not supposed to ruin their reputation. They're not supposed to ruin your reputation. It's supposed to be, you know, very, very pleasant, respectful separation of ways. So on this page, because of the fiduciary relationship between the sales associates and the employer, oh, I did not want that. Those responsibilities don't end when they terminate employment. This is good for the state exam. So just because they fire you doesn't mean you're no longer responsible or that you don't have any fiduciary responsibility anymore. You're supposed to, again, be professional, and you're not supposed to harm your broker or their reputation, and vice versa. So I remember the question said, when does fiduciary end? And then one answer says, upon termination of employment. Another one says 30 days after. And the right answer is it never ends. So you're never supposed to disparage, harm the other one's reputation. There's not a time period, an expiration period. You're always supposed to be respectful and not hurt somebody else's business, and vice versa. They're not supposed to damage, you know, your license or cause problems for you to go work somewhere else. Okay. There's something called multiple licenses, which is not to be confused with a group license. Typically on the state exam, multiple licenses is for brokers only. A broker can have more than one real estate license. And you're probably saying, why would they need to have more than one real estate license? Because they could have more than one office. So every single office has to have its own license on the wall, and the address on the license has to match the physical location where the license is hung. So it's not like, see, mortgage brokers are different. Mortgage brokers, their laptop is their office, and wherever they are is where their office is. And their license, they can take it off the wall and put it on the next, but not with real estate. Your license is unique to that address I'm talking about for the broker. So the broker is a person, but then they make a legitimate brokerage, which could have a completely different name. You know, like RE/MAX is a franchise. So a RE/MAX office is not licensed on its own. It has to have a licensed broker who makes that office legitimate. So on the wall, there's going to be a registration that says RE/MAX is a brokerage. So it's a real estate company, but then it has to have a broker's license that makes that legitimate. So you just can't have an office without a broker being responsible for that office. Doesn't mean they're physically there. So you could have a broker have 100 different offices, but they take responsibility for it. Okay. So if a broker decides they don't want that location anymore, what they do is they cancel that license, and then they get a new one for whatever new address that they have. So those are branch offices, and it takes a licensed broker to make the branch office legitimate. They register the location, and it has to be unique to the address that's on that one. So that's multiple licenses. That's why a broker could have more than one real estate license. Sales associates cannot have more than one license. You work for one broker at a time. You might work for a broker who owns several locations, and you're allowed as a sales associate to bounce around all the different offices that your broker has. Like in timeshare, you know, you have Marriott or Hilton, and they have several different locations. So when you get your license active, what they do is it says you work for the group of Hilton, the group of Marriott. So a group license is for a sales associate who works for a broker that has several locations. The broker, it's called multiple licenses because it's more than one license. Don't confuse the two. And they will try to confuse you on the state exam. But you're not supposed to let that happen. Okay. I think we're at the end. So that's what, a group license is. So group license is for a sales associate. So if the question says sales associate, answer group license. If the question says broker, answer multiple licenses. Okay, that's the end of this chapter. So let's take a nice break and then we'll do chapter 4. Let me give you a half an hour break so you can get something to eat and relax. 8:45. 8:45 is good.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. See you in half an hour. Righty. We are back. All right, and thank you for Cherise for sharing your video and everybody else. It's as the computer tech said, you need to share your video, you know, unless you're chewing something you don't want everyone to see, but we like to see that you're actually here and not just that it's open on the computer. Okay, so this chapter is more important for the state exam. This chapter has 7 questions on the state exam. So definitely more important. Oh my goodness, it's so chilly all of a sudden. Okay. So there's not a lot of vocabulary, but there's a lot of important points and phrases. So this whole chapter is about the relationship between the real estate agent and the buyer or the seller or both. And so that's what we're going to get into. What type of responsibilities do you have and what do you call it? So there's some vocabulary we need to talk about. Common law. Common law is not official law. Common law is the way we naturally act and what we assume is the law, but it's not necessarily what's in any law book. It's just the way society acts with each other. Oops. Okay, that is telling me it's supposed to be back for break. Oh, sorry. Statutory law is the actual written laws. Administrative laws are more like rules. So administrative law, like about your license, that's not like criminal or civil law. It just has to do with laws about your specific licensure itself. So when they use the word agency, they mean relationship, and a person who delegates authority to another person is called a principal. So you can say your broker is your principal because they are giving you work, but also your customer is your principal. I don't want to use the word boss, but it's a person who engages you to do work for them. So the buyer, if you're working for them, or the seller, if you're working for them, they are known as your principal, and you are their agent. Also, you are the agent to your broker. Your broker is the person who engages you to do work, and you do work for them. So that's the relationship. What do you call yourself? So the person who gives you an opportunity is called the principal. The person who does the work is called the actual agent. And between people, again, they love this word on the state exam, fiduciary. Fiduciary is a relationship of trust with somebody else's money. So there is fiduciary between you and your broker. So you're trusting that your broker is going to pay you. You do all this work and you're hoping that you're going to get the money. And then your broker trusts that you're not going to do something to cause them to lose their license. Also, there's a relationship of trust between you and your customer. So if you're working for the seller, they're trusting that you are looking out for their best interests to get them the most money possible. The opposite is true if you're working for the buyer. The buyer is trusting you to make sure you look after their money and that they pay the least for something. So it's just what you call the relationship between people. So agency, the person who has you do the job is the principal. The person who does the work is the agent. There's a fiduciary relationship between all that are involved. Another vocabulary, there's this word caveat emptor. Very important for the state exam. And this word fiduciary, they love it. They use it all over the place. Caveat emptor means let the buyer beware in Latin. So basically, buyer, you're on your own. Good luck. When it boils down to it, you could have somebody that you think is looking out for your best interest, but you always have the responsibility to look out for your own best interests. So yeah, you can trust people, but you always should fact check, to make sure. And if you don't, buyer beware. So you could recommend, it's like going to a car dealership. The salesman's going to show you all these features and it seems wonderful and this and that and the other, but you should check out things for yourself. And if you go ahead and buy it just based upon somebody else's word, if something wrong happens, it's your own fault. So caveat emptor, let the buyer be aware. That sounds better than beware, like, ooh, there's ghouls and goblins. No, be aware, be awake, and make sure you check things for yourself. So it's vocabulary. By the way, another expression for buyer beware, caveat emptor, but they also call it at arm's length. When you have an at arm's length transaction, it means you're at a distance. So if you keep somebody at an arm's length, they're not your buddy, they're not your friend, they're not in your circle of trust that close to you. You're keeping them at a distance. So that's another expression. Buyer beware, caveat emptor, an at arm's length transaction. Okay, a general agent. Oops. Come on. A general agent is somebody who's authorized to do all different types of things. So what's the relationship between you and your broker? You're an agent underneath them, but we could also call you a general agent because you do all types of things. You're not pigeoned into just one specific duty. So for your broker, you might find renters, you might find buyers, you might find sellers. You could do all of those different things. So on the state exam, if they say, what relationship do you have with your broker? And the answer to that would be, you are a general agent to your broker. A special agent is somebody who handles either one specific transaction only, or maybe just a part of a transaction. A general agent wears a bunch of different hats, but a special agent is engaged to do just one specific task, and then that's it. So you're not a special agent to your broker. Even though you're special, you're a general agent to your broker, meaning you do all kinds of things. So this is all, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Wow. Okay, so in Florida, there are 3 different names for different levels of a relationship between the real estate agent and their customer. Their customer could be the buyer, their customer could be the seller, or could be both. So the 3 different names are no brokerage relationship, single agent relationship, transaction broker. And I'm going to explain each one. Okay, so no broker, that doesn't even make sense. Okay, wait a minute. What relationship do you have? No broker. It just sounds weird. But the word broker means to negotiate. And it still sounds weird. Okay, you're not hiring me to negotiate for you? But what circumstance could there be a relationship where there's no negotiation involved between you and the client? So sometimes your client already has a buyer. They've already found somebody, but they just don't know what to do next. They don't know, how do you close? How do you get it transferred? How do you get a title company? They don't know the steps involved in a real estate transaction. So they could hire you not to broker. Broker means to negotiate. So maybe they already have a buyer. They've already agreed on a price. So they don't need you getting involved in between, but they do need you to handle the paperwork and get the thing transferred. So they could hire you in that capacity. So one name is no brokerage. You're not negotiating on my behalf. I'm going to do my own negotiations, and I'll let you know. And then I need you to step in to do the closing and process the transfer of ownership. So that's what a no broker is. A single agent is a real estate agent who who is looking out for the best interests of one side only. You can work for both sides of a deal. You just can't hurt the other side. So if I represent the buyer, I can also represent the seller. It's a little bit tricky, but as long as I don't help one take advantage of the other, if I'm careful with the words I choose, so I use open phrases, not to pigeonhole and not to give up information, negotiating power. If I can do that, then I could be on both sides of the deal. Both sides of the deal is called a transaction broker. So they're not representing the buyer or the seller on their side. They're handling the transaction between the two of them. And they're trying to be fair and trying to be neutral. A single agent is the opposite. A single agent is all in one side or the other. So I'm looking out for the seller, which means buyer beware. Now, that doesn't mean I don't speak to the buyer. If the buyer doesn't have anybody representing them, if they're on their own, I have to talk to them to get the deal closed, but I don't help them try to negotiate better terms. I'm one-sided. And these are choices. What are you with your client? It's negotiable, like everything in real estate. Sometimes
Linda, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So, I guess my question is the only difference between 1 and 3, your transaction and no brokerage, is just the determining part of the negotiating part. To give an example, what I'm trying to ask is, if I'm helping my uncle sell his house to my father,
Right.
which one would particularly be? Because I'd be representing both my uncle and my father. But if they're working out the deal between themselves, would I be a no broker, or am I
You
a
would
transaction?
be a no broker. So if they
Okay.
want to argue between the two of them about what the price is and what they're going to give, and does the furniture come with, does this come with it, and they don't want you to get in between, but they need your help doing everything else, that's no broker. Transaction broker is where I'm giving information completely to each side, but I'm not taking a side. I'm not helping one side more than the other side. With the no broker, I don't even discuss the money. That's between those two people. And then once they come up with a price and decide everything, they let me know. And then I just do the paperwork. So that's a no broker. But a
Perfect. Thank you
transaction,
so much.
you're welcome. So a transaction broker might say this. Let's say your father and his brother, they have an argument, and they say, tell him I want $500,000. And then you go over to your uncle and say, okay, he said that he's looking to get $500,000. You're the messenger. And then your uncle says, I'm not going to give him a penny over 450. So then you go back to your father. Okay, he made you a counter offer of 450. What's your response? So you're like the ball in a tennis match. You're going back and forth. Where the no broker is, there is no ball back and forth. You just step in when it's all been decided, if that helps.
Perfect. Yeah, it does.
Okay, good. Alrighty, so there's different responsibilities for each relationship. It's kind of like dating, being engaged, and being married. There's different levels of responsibilities there. When you're dating, there's no specific commitment. When you're engaged, you're looking forward to that. And when you're married, it's supposed to be a commitment. So with real estate relationships, it's a relationship. And there's certain responsibilities that you have the duty, and you have to memorize these for the state exam. So we're going to start out with the least commitment. Think of this like speed dating or blind dating. The no brokerage is no commitment. You're just dating, right? So what do you have to do? What's your responsibility in that capacity? You only have 3 things that you're obligated to as a duty to your client. Okay. So you have to keep track of the money. That's what account for funds mean. You have to be honest and fair. Okay. And then you have to disclose if there's any defects that you know of to the property. Now, if you don't know of them, it's not your fault. For example, now, I have a house over in Montverde, in Bella Colina, and I decided to treat myself, you know, with I had a bunch of rental properties. I sold them and I used that money and I bought myself a really nice house in Bella Colina. And 3 weeks after I bought it, everything started falling apart, you know, like every appliance one by one by one by one. And this house is like over $1 million. Like it's 1.375. So you expect not to have to worry about things for at least a little while. But 3 weeks after I bought it, there was this crazy windstorm, and then, you know, it crashed, it broke glass, and it flew into the pool, and I had new pool pumps, and this and that, and one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. Well, I did an insurance claim, and it took me 2 years fighting, you know, because the roof needs to be replaced. It's obvious that it's a leaking roof because there's bubbles in the wall and all of this stuff every time it rains. And so at the insurance mediation, they pull up a claim back from 2007 from the original owner. Well, I don't have access to that. And I didn't buy it from the original owner. I bought it from the second owner. And they didn't tell me that there was an insurance claim, and they probably didn't even know it themselves. So the bad thing for me was exactly where everything was leaking in the walls is the same spots in that previous claim. My argument was, no, you know, you can see by the pictures of the house, the condition of the house then, the condition of the house now. It's obviously things have been done, but maybe the root of the problem's never been fixed, and it keeps coming out in the same places because those are just the spots in the wall that are like the path of least resistance, you know? So this is the argument. Now, it should be that these insurance companies, why don't they tell people, hey, this house has a previous claim? You know, they don't. And they have privy to this information, this insider information between insurance companies. Well, I would like to know that as a consumer before I buy a house with that, you know, an expensive house. I would like to know if there's been a lot of damage, and now with the hurricanes that we had last year, you know, with Milton, look at all those houses in St. Petersburg and Tampa and Clearwater. Definitely you want to know to what extent those houses were damaged. And then you want to know, was there licensed contractors that did the mold remediation, that rebuilt it? You want to know these things as a buyer. But unfortunately, it's your responsibility. And you can't blame it on the real estate agent because it's not really their responsibility to go try to dig it up. And it's not like public information anyhow. So to what extent are you responsible? Can it come back to you and say, well, you should have been looking out for me. You should have known better. The information isn't out there. So if you know that there's a defect, if you know that they had an insurance claim, if you know that there's mold, if you know that there's this, then you have to disclose it to the client. Even if you're not brokering, which means negotiating, you still have to let them know if there's defects to the property. Defects is not negotiation. Defects is there's something wrong. So if you know about it, you must disclose. So you got to be honest. If you know of any problems, you disclose it. And then you have to keep track of all the money. And what they mean is that they give you a deposit. You have to be careful not to lose it, that kind of thing. If they pay you to do an inspection, you have responsibility. So as a no broker, that's the only 3 things that you are obligated to do. Be careful with the money, be honest, and if you know there's a problem, disclose it. That's it for a no broker. So if you look at this chart, it kind of breaks it down. The broker, oops, geez, come on. The no broker only has 3 things that they have to do. Can they do more? Sure, but they're obligated to do those 3 things. Now, a transaction broker is the next level up. A transaction broker could work for the buyer, could work for the seller, or it could work for could work for both sides. And what responsibilities do they have? Well, they have the same first three. So by the way, those first three are in wow. Those first three are in common for all of the relationships. So every relationship has those first three, but then it goes further. They have to use skill, care, and diligence. In other words, be careful, use some prudence, some common sense, do some due diligence. They have to present all offers and counter offers. If you ever watch the TV shows like $1 Million Listings and stuff, you know what drives me nuts is when, especially the one for the New York cast, if you ever watch it, they'll say, "Oh, I'm not even going to bring that offer to my client. It's so ridiculous. They would fire me if I would bring them any offer less than $10 million. They would get rid of me. This is a silly offer." And they say stuff like that, but you can't do that. As a real estate agent, you're just a messenger. So if somebody offers $5 million for a $15 million property, okay, we know it's ridiculous, but it's an offer. So of course you can go and you can explain it to your customer that it's ridiculous. You can say, we got an offer. Of course it's ridiculous, but I'm obligated to give it to you. It's $5 million. If you say it like that, they're not going to be mad at you. They're going to be mad at the jerk that offered $5 million, but it doesn't have to be hostile towards you. So you can't hide or bury offers. Also, you can't be selfish, because what if you have a lot of people interested in a property and you don't tell the seller because you're waiting to get a big offer because you want to make more commission? That's not right either. So you're not allowed to agree or disagree or bury offers or decide which ones to present. You present them all to your client and say, okay, this one, they're offering this amount of money, but they don't need any financing. It's a cash deal. They can close in 3 days. This one is asking for a 2-month period to do financing. This one needs to have inspections. This one is asking for a new roof. So you present all the offers, terms and conditions, and you let your client decide which one's the best for them. So that's present all offers and counter offers. Then it says exercising limited confidentiality. When you see the word limited in the question, the answer is transaction broker. It's the only one that has limited confidentiality. So what does limited confidentiality mean? It's kind of common sense. If somebody tells me, like I'm working for both sides, if the seller says, I want 10 million, but as long as I get at least 8, I'll do it. I'm not going to go run to the buyer and say, hey, they're asking for this, but they'll take 8. Vice versa. If I'm also working for the buyer's side and they say to me, hey, I'm going to offer them 9, but I really don't mind going up to 9.5. I'm not going to go over to the seller and tell them that. I'm working for both sides, but I can't help one side take advantage of the other side. I have to be neutral and just transfer information. So if they say, okay, so what is your offer? Okay, tell them I want 10 million. What is your offer? Tell them I'm willing to give them 9. And then I go back to the seller. Okay, they made $9 million offer. The seller says, no, I won't take less than 9.9. I go back to the buyer. They want 9.9. Then maybe the buyer makes a counter offer, or maybe they walk away. You know, so if they say, oh, I don't want it, say, well, you want to make some kind of counter offer? Would you want them to leave the furniture behind? Would that be good for you to offer 9.9? So you go back and forth to try to make a solution, but you don't tell the secrets to either side to hurt them. So it's limited confidentiality because you can't be silent completely. You're trying to get the deal done, but you have to use caution and some common sense and be careful what information you give to the other side. That's what that means. And it's only true when you're dealing with both sides as a transaction broker. And no broker, you're not talking about the money. So they're discussing that. So there is no limited confidentiality. In single agent, You're only handling one person, you're loyal to them, so there is no release of any information. Okay. The last one, perform any additional duties that you both agree upon. So what could that possibly mean? Maybe they hire you and they say, okay, I want you to have an open house every single weekend until it's sold. Well, that's a big commitment. I mean, they're not your only customer, I hope. And it costs money. You know, you open house, you just don't put a sign and open the door. You could do that, but who wants to come? You know, you put out a spread, you have champagne, you have donuts, you have whatever, catering, yada, yada, yada. You do advertising. So if you agree to do it, you agree to do it, but it has to be mutual from both sides. So those are the 7 duties when you're working with both sides. Now, when in the state of Florida, they automatically assume everyone's wanting to work on with both sides of the deal because you can make commission off of both sides. So in the state of Florida, they assume your responsibility, your relationship is a transaction broker. So in Florida, if you are acting as a transaction broker, you don't have to give any disclosures to explain your duties because it's assumed. The only time you have to give a disclosure is when you're doing something that's not normal, which is no broker or single agent. So if you're not negotiating, you have to fill out a form that says, I'm not brokering for you. I'm not negotiating for you. And these are the duties I owe you. Honesty, full disclosure, and keep track of the money. That's it. If you're a single agent, it's when you're completely faithful, loyal to one side of the deal, which could be either the buyer or the seller, but not both. You can't be a single agent to both in the same transaction because you can't be loyal to 2 things at the same time. So if I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to have to let the seller know, hey, listen, I'm their single agent. I am looking out for them and I owe them these duties. And if I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to say to them, okay, I'm looking out for you and this is what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to keep track of the first 3 are the same. Keep track of the money, be honest and fair, disclose anything hidden that I know about. So by the way, is there any hurricane damage to your house? Do you have an open insurance claim? Is there mold? Have you had problems in the past? When's the last time your roof was inspected? So I'm going to ask those things. I'm going to use skill, care, diligence, but I owe them complete confidentiality, obedience, loyalty, and full disclosure as a single agent. So the single agent has 10 duties. The transaction broker has 7 duties, and the no broker has 3 duties. There's no easy way around it. You're going to have to memorize them. I like this chart here because I'm a visual learner. So you can kind of see how it builds. Like there's just this 3 that's the same for all of them. Then transaction broker adds more. And then single agent is, like the whole shebang. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks, Cameron. I like that. So speaking of fiduciary, so when is there fiduciary? That's trust with somebody else's money. Is there a fiduciary relationship? For transaction broker, there's no fiduciary because you're not necessarily being entrusted with the money. And no broker definitely. But the single agent, yes, there's a fiduciary relationship because you are looking out for them completely. You're loyal, you're obedient. If the seller says, hey, listen, this is what I want to list it for, you can advise them if it's good or not, but they are your principal, your director. They're telling you what to do. And if you don't like it, then you just don't take the assignment. But they guide you. So when you're in a single agent relationship, they are your principal. It's the only time you call them principal. Otherwise, it's just a customer. So they're telling you what to do. This is what I want. This is how I want it done. And that's single agent, how it's different. Because they're basically telling you what to do. They're directing you. This is what I want. This is what I expect. And you could be working for the buyer or the seller, but not both as a single agent. So if I'm a single agent for the buyer and the seller, I have to communicate with them because they're representing themselves. What relationship would I call it between me and the seller? If I'm a single agent for the buyer, then what would you call the relationship I have with the seller out of these three choices?
For the seller, wouldn't it be brokerage relationship?
Yes, no brokerage. Yep, because you don't have any fiduciary to them. You're not negotiating for them. They're on their own, and you're letting them know that. But you still have to be fair. You still have to be honest, and you still have to disclose if you know of any hidden defects. I see hidden. You don't have to point out visible defects on a property. If there's a hole in the roof, you don't have to mention it. People can look up. But if there's a leak in a pipe in the attic, people can't see that. Maybe they smell it, like it's musty or something. But if you can't see it and you know it's there, you have to point it out. But if it's something that's clear as day, hey, there's a hole in the fireplace, there's a hole in the roof, there's a fit through the door, I don't have to point that out. People have eyes to see. But if something is hidden that they couldn't tell, hey, the pool has a crack and that should be fixed because there's a leak, or the septic tank that has issues, or so if there's a defect I know about that can't be visibly seen, I have to point it out. But if it's visible, I don't have to mention it at all. Okay, let's see. So the next few pages, they just go into detail of all of the things we already talked about. We already mentioned all of the different duties for the transaction broker, for the single agent. So the next several pages, that's all it does is repeat it. I like to use this chart back here. And I mean, these were, excuse me. If these words make sense to you, there's no reason to read all of that. It's just repetition. So these are the duties, but they explain each one in each separate relationship. So single agency is going to go through each of the duties one by one, again and again. And then when you get to transaction broker, it's going to repeat all of the same duties. You see this list? It's the same list that you had up there 2 pages ago. And then as no broker, it mentions the 3 things. So it just keeps repeating. I don't want you to feel cheated that we skipped those pages, but it's just repeating the same information, which you can read it for yourself and make that decision on your own. Single agency is the most complete. It has the most protections. It has the most duties involved, but it's completely your choice. Again, in the state of Florida, they assume that the real estate agent is just acting as a transaction broker. Now, by the way, if I call myself a transaction broker to the buyer, that doesn't mean I automatically represent the seller, but it means I could. Okay. But I say I'm a single agent for the buyer, then the only thing I can be for the seller is no broker. Any questions about that? Again, if you see the word limited representation, the answer is automatically a transaction broker. Okay, let's talk about transitioning. What happens if someone hires you as a single agent? Maybe you don't like it. Maybe they wanted your loyalty and they tell you all their secrets. The seller tells you, well, I want you to be my single agent because I want to be completely honest with you and I don't want you telling this to the buyer. They might tell you, hey, I'm going through a divorce and I need to sell this property quick and this and that. And they tell you a lot of personal information. So they trust you. And because there's a single agency agreement, they feel like they can tell you all these things. But sometimes that relationship might not work for you. Yeah, it's what they want. So in big companies, like Remax, Century 21, Compass, you have a lot of agents in the same brokerage. And you might be representing the seller as a single agent, but another agent has a buyer and you all work for the same company. It's acceptable, it's understandable that information gets spilled because at the morning meetings, hey, I have a desperate seller, this is what they need to do, they need to sell it in a week, otherwise they're going to lose the property, blah blah blah. Okay, the beans have been spilled, so the information is already out there. So what would you do in that situation? You can go back to the person you're working for, whether it's the buyer or the seller, and you can explain to them the single agency situation might not work out. I have another agent that works with me and they think they have a good person that would like your property, but we all work for the same company, so there might be a conflict of interest unless you release me from the obligations of single agency and let me be your transaction broker. So basically, you're asking them to reduce your responsibilities to them. They might say yes, they might say no. So if they say no, I won't release you, I want you to still represent me, be loyal to me, then you can't even show the property to the other agent in your office because there's already a crossover and a contamination of information. You would have to look outside and find somebody completely unrelated that doesn't have any privy to information that you gave. So when you ask to transition, it's asking to be released from single agent and to go down to transaction broker, which has less duties, but also more flexibility. You can work on both sides. So you can't just do that on your own and change the relationship. If they hired you to be loyal, you have to ask them as your principal, listen, this is the situation. I think I have somebody good, but I need you to agree. They have to consent to it. So there's a form that you fill out, and it's typically on the state exam, and the name of it's right here. And you see it's in this dark part, consent to transition to transaction broker. It's a long name and it kind of creates a rhythm. So I can't even say it without creating a rhythm. Consent to transition to transaction broker. To transition to transaction broker. Sounds goofy, but when you go to the state exam, there's so much information you're going to forget. And then you're like, what the heck is the name of that form? It's the only one that fits. If you do the rhythm, if I use the words, it either fits or it doesn't. No broker. I still had rhythm, but the words finished. Single agent. That doesn't work either. Consent to transition to transaction. It fits. So you guys can't see me drumming. I used to have a little drum, like at the real estate school, like when I'm physically in front of people. If you can make up goofy things, rhymes, songs, poems, it helps you memorize things. So it's a lot of information, but it's the only one that fits the rhythm. The single agent, no broker. consent to transition to transaction broker. It fits. So the name of the form is consent to transition to transaction broker. Consent to transition to transaction broker. You must, the word must is rarely used in this book. This is one of the handful of musts. You must have them consent to transition to transaction broker before you change the relationship. They must sign the release form. The name of the release form is, let's beat a dead horse, consent to transition to transaction broker. It must be implemented. It must be signed. So in the state exam, they'll give you a scenario and they'll talk to you about that. They'll give you this whole big story, you know, that you explained it to the client, and the client said, oh, okay. I tell you what, why don't you show them the property? If they like it, then we'll sign the form. Otherwise, let's just keep it the way the relationship is as a single agent. And so that will be one of the choices. Is that a right choice? No, you cannot wait till later, because later is too late. They might sue you for breach of confidentiality. So you have to get them to sign the release form before you act in a different way. So if they don't sign the release form, you continue to act as a single agent looking out for their best interest, and you cannot show the property to other aides in your office because there's, you know, there's leaking of information. So if they sign it, then you can show it and you can negotiate and all of that good stuff. So that's the form that must be signed before you show the property or do anything else. This just gives you an example. So if you're a transaction broker for the seller, you could be either a transaction broker for the buyer or a no broker for the buyer. If you're a single agent for the seller, the only thing you could be is a no broker for the buyer, and vice versa. Okay. Disclosures. Disclosures is paperwork, things that you have to give or have signed. So that's what disclosures they're talking about. This whole entire book, the state exam, is all about residential property. We learned yesterday residential has a specific definition: 4 units or less on 10 acres or less of land. So the laws only protect residential purchases. So if it's residential, then all of the laws are in effect, and you have to act a certain way and protect the clients, this, that, and the other. Okay, so this is the definition. We talked about it yesterday, but it's 4 units or less on 10 acres or less of land is considered to be residential property. Don't worry about these numbers for now. They're going to be different. Like I said, Michael is working on scanning the whole new book, the 48th edition, and we'll be giving you copies of it with, and what these are the numbers of the school exam question, but these are going to change because the new edition, like today I got a copy of the exam, so I'm going to be going through the book and highlighting this as well, so I can explain it to you guys. So he's doing it as fast as he can, but it's a little bit tricky. Okay, so a duplex is 1 building, but it has 2 units, right? A triplex is 1 building, but has 3 units. A quadruplex is 1 building, but has 4 units. So a quadruplex is still residential because it's 4 or less, as long as it's on 10 acres or less of land. 2 duplexes would be considered residential because 2 and 2, 4. But if you had a triplex and a duplex on the same piece of land, that would not be residential because it's 5 units. It would be considered commercial. And that's what they're trying to explain here. So 4 units. What's a unit? A space that a family shares privacy. So it could be, a room, you know, or it could be a separate building. But unit is where a family has privacy that live together. Okay, let's talk about, see, they just repeated everything. Again, they repeated no broker, single agent. Don't highlight that. I'm just pointing at the fact. This chapter repeats it like 4 different times on different pages, the 3 relationships. The only thing that's really important on this page is record keeping. How long do you have to keep records? For 5 years on all residential transactions. If a contract has been or an offer has been made and accepted. So there's a thing called a dead file. A dead file is, where people just ask for information, you make an offer, but nothing happens after that. You don't have to keep those records for 5 years. Only if you make an offer, the other party accepts the offer, then maybe the deal dies after that and nothing happens. But once you have a signed offer from both sides, that's an active deal, and that you have to keep records of the paperwork for 5 years. Usually your broker keeps that at their office, because if the broker gets called in, somebody sues another person, they have to have that information handy. It's 5 years. Look again. They repeat again, no broker, single agent. It's the same things we talked about 5 pages ago. No broker, 3 responsibilities. Single agent, 10. Transaction broker, 7. Okay. Exceptions to the rule. Anytime you learn a rule, you're going to always learn exceptions to the rule. So, when do you not have to give disclosures? So if we go through them one by one, maybe they'll kind of make sense. There's 6 different situations that there's not really a brokerage relationship created yet. So if the person already is represented by a broker, so let's say you're having an open house and a customer comes in, they say, oh, I was sent to take a look at this. My agent told me to come take a look. My agent's name is so-and-so, so-and-so. So they're telling you somebody is already representing them. So then you don't try to get them to fire that agent and hire you. You don't have any brokerage responsibility to that person. They're allowed to come look at the place. If there's an open house, you can give out information. You can give out how they have those sheets at an open house that gives all the details, like the square footage, the property tax, etc. That's not negotiation. That's just information. And let's see. That's not really important. When responding to general. Okay, this one is good. If someone just asks you for basic factual information, you don't have to give them a disclosure. So disclosure means the paperwork, no broker, transaction broker, single agent. The first time you meet a client, you're supposed to discuss what type of relationship they want to have with you. So it's kind of like going on a blind date and saying, okay, are we going to date exclusively, be engaged, or married the first time you meet them? But with a client, you have to establish the relationship from the beginning. Do you want me to represent you? Or are you open to this? Blah, 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 blah. But the exceptions to that is if it's an open house, if they already said, hey, I'm already represented by an agent, or if somebody's asking just factual information. So if somebody calls up and says, hey, I see you listed a house. Can you tell me what the property taxes are? They just want to know some information. You're allowed to give them the answer. That doesn't mean you have a relationship with them or obligations to them. It hasn't created a brokerage relationship just by giving them basic information. So, what else? So yes, built by owner, consider shooters and wanted. None of the rest are important. These are pretty much it that you have to memorize. Okay, non-residential. I mentioned a few times now that this whole book is about residential transactions. The laws protect residential purchases. The law doesn't care about commercial property, industrial property, because they figure those are businesses and they're on their own and they can do their own thing. So they don't try to protect them like they do the consumers who are just trying to buy a house to live in. So non-residential transactions aren't residential. So who cares? So there is no disclosure you have to give them. You don't have to establish any relationship. So you don't have to give them a form that says no broker, here's the duties, transaction broker, here's the duties, single agent, here's the duties. If it's not residential, who cares? Buyer beware. The government kinds of figures, if somebody's not buying a house to live in, they're buying an investment property, they should be savvy enough to do their own due diligence and protect themselves. So the laws aren't there to protect anything except residential purchases. In a non-residential transaction, if the buyer and the seller each are millionaires, doesn't mean the property is $1 million. It means the net worth of the buyer, net worth of the seller is at least $1 million. They can have what's called a designated sales associate. It's kind of like kind of going into Nordstrom's and you have a helper, like a shopper, what do they call it? A shopping assistant? Like someone to help you go around the store and find things. It's your designated salesperson. So you could be buying a collection of properties and the broker says, oh, I have a team in this office. I can assign Judy to help you find commercial. Ralph is going to help you find industrial. Susie's going to help you with the financing. Jennifer's going to help you with the appraisal. So you could have a broker that assigns different specific duties to different salespeople in the office to help a non-residential customer. And they call that designated sales associates. It could be for the buyer, could be for the seller. So it just has to be non-residential and each side are millionaires. That's called designated sales associate. It's a good one for the state exam as well. Okay. And look what we have again. Again, there. How many times is this now? 5 times they've mentioned single agent and all the duties. Okay. Like that, I mean, that kind of makes me want to punch the book. Why is it there again? It's because whoever published the book, they want to sell you a new book every year. So they take out some stuff, put some new stuff in. And this chapter, it looks like they just said, leave it all in there. Because, I mean, come on, they mentioned it how many times already? Single agent, single agent, single agent. Okay, this one's good. Terminating relationships. Okay, and I think this is the probably the last thing on this chapter. Let's see. So up until now, we've been talking about creating a relationship. We learned that there are 3 types of relationships. Either you're a no broker, transaction broker, or single agent. We learned that in the state of Florida, the automatic expected relationship is transaction broker. If you're acting as a transaction broker, you don't have to give a disclosure. Only if you're a no broker or a single agent, which is not the norm, that's when you have to give a form to the client to let them know these are the duties that I owe to you. So that's all about creating a relationship. And then if you're a single agent and you want to decrease a transaction broker, they have to sign a release form before you change. And we know the release form is the consent to transition to transaction broker. And the last thing we're going to learn is terminating the relationship. So until now has been making the relationship, and now we're going to terminate it. The word terminate doesn't necessarily mean to break. It simply means to end. When you terminate a brokerage relationship, you're ending the relationship. How does it end? Different ways. It could end nice. It could end not so nice. It could be broken. But every relationship in real estate ends when? When
Deal is
does,
done.
yeah, when deal is done, the relationship is over for that deal. Doesn't mean you never talk to that person again. You can, you want to sell them something else or whatever, but terminating the relationship for that deal. So if you're a transaction broker on this deal, the deal closes, that relationship is over. You want to buy another property, it's a new relationship. So on the state exam, this is the answer to the question I had. The question says, what is the best way to terminate a brokerage relationship? And the best way is by doing what? It's one word. That's the first
Sell.
word. The first word is fulfillment. Oops. You see this word fulfillment? Fulfillment means you completed your promise, right? So it's done. If I promised you to do something and I did it, the promise has been fulfilled. And that's the great way to end a relationship, is everyone does what they promised to do. You hire somebody to paint your house. You say, I'm going to pay you $5,000. They paint your house, you pay them. The relationship has been fulfilled. The contract has been fulfilled. That's the best way to end that relationship. But of course, there are other ways. So the positive way, and the only way it's good, is fulfillment. Do what you promise. That's the best way to end it. But there are other ways, and you have to memorize them. So the next one is mutual agreement to terminate. Both sides decide to go their own separate ways. Doesn't mean they're arguing, but you might say to me, hey, Linda, can you help me find a house? And maybe I do it first, but then I get busy with tax season and I say, I don't really have time. And you say, yeah, do you mind if I go somewhere else? And I'm like, I completely understand. We part our ways. That's mutual agreement to end it. So we're not fighting. The next one is expiration of terms. So if someone says, I give you 90 days to sell my house, 90 days go by, I don't sell your house, the relationship is over. The next one, the broker renounces, meaning the broker wants to quit. And the one after that, the principal wants to fire you. That's the principal revokes the relationship. And then the next one is death, and destruction. So if the seller dies, if the buyer dies, if the property is destroyed, the relationship is over. You can't force somebody to buy something that, is damaged from the hurricane. And the last one is bankruptcy. Bankruptcy cancels all open contracts. So these are ways to end the relationship as far as the real estate transaction goes. Doesn't mean you're terminating relationship with that person, you'll never talk to them again. It's just the end of that real estate transaction. And that is the end of this chapter. So, questions? Any confusion?
No, ma'am.
Anybody want to ask anything? Are you okay? Are you frustrated? Are you confused? Are you exhausted?
Exhausted.
I bet. Me too. So if you have questions, you know, because it's one thing listening to me and then when you go in the book and read it and then, you know what? Write them down and then ask me tomorrow. And I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. All righty. So good night. Good night, Evelyn. Good night, Nice. Good night, Cameron.
Good night, Linda.
Good night, Dorian. Good night, Leslie. Good night, Cherise. Good night,
Miss Linda,
Cameron.
I had a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
The last time I took the class, Michael had an application that had a practice test on it.
Yeah.
Does he still have?
Yes, he does. You mean the app to do the practice test? He does, and I'll
Yeah.
I'll ask him if it's still functioning. And also, yeah, so Michael developed an app where you can do a bunch of practice problems and it shows you what the right answer is and it gives you reasons and all of that good stuff. And it has a bunch of free stuff. And then if you want additional questions, you can pay like, I don't know, it's $5.99 or whatever for additional information. I'll find out for him and I'll tell you tomorrow. And also, like I said, Michael is wants to be a FREC member. Now you know what a FREC member is. So he would be a licensed person. He's been a broker for longer than 5 years. So that's what he's trying to be on the FREC board as a volunteer. And he did ask me to share